Let me pose a question that might change the way you think about your entire life. What if discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do hard things, but about understanding the parts of yourself that don't want to do them? In the next few minutes, I'm going to take you into a psychological and philosophical journey that Carl Jung hinted at in modern self-development. We're going to completely rewire the way you think about motivation, procrastination, and willpower. Not with hacks, not with hustle, but with something far more powerful, self-integration. Because until you understand why you resist, no amount of discipline will last. But once you do, you'll never struggle with discipline again. We've all been taught the same thing. Discipline is about control. It's about pushing through, forcing action, crushing excuses. But let's get brutally honest, how often has that approach worked for you long term? You've probably had moments of extreme productivity, bursts of motivation, even streaks where you felt on top of the world. But then it fades, the momentum dies, you fall off, and you blame yourself. You call yourself lazy, unmotivated, weak. But what if I told you that the problem isn't laziness, it's fragmentation? You are not one mind, you are many. You are a collection of drives, fears, traumas, aspirations, and identities. And when those parts are in conflict, discipline becomes a war zone. Jung called this the conflict between the ego and the shadow. The ego says, I'm going to be productive today. The shadow says, I don't want to feel that pressure again. The ego says, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. The shadow whispers, you're still exhausted from carrying the weight of being good enough. And so the war begins. This is why we sabotage ourselves. Not because we hate success, but because parts of us associate success with danger, with rejection, with pressure, with being seen. And if those parts aren't acknowledged and integrated, they will quietly resist every attempt you make to move forward. This is the psychological root of procrastination, inner conflict. And you can't out-discipline inner conflict. You have to resolve it. You have to turn toward the parts of you that resist and ask, what are you protecting me from? What are you afraid will happen if I grow? If I succeed? If I change? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the keys to real transformation. Because once you meet those inner parts with compassion, not judgment, they begin to shift. They stop sabotaging, they stop resisting, and they start collaborating. That's when discipline becomes effortless. Not because you've forced yourself to comply, but because your whole self is finally aligned. Let's make this real. Think of a time you set a goal and then abandoned it. Maybe it was working out, writing a book, starting a business. You had the plan, you had the tools, but you didn't follow through. Ask yourself, what part of me didn't want this? What deeper fear was hiding underneath that decision? Because discipline is not the absence of resistance. It's the ability to have a conscious relationship with it. Jung believed that the unconscious rules our lives until we make it conscious. So when you say I lack discipline, what you're really saying is, I have unconscious parts of me that are not yet in agreement with my conscious goals. That's not failure, that's fragmentation. And fragmentation can be healed. But you have to stop trying to dominate yourself and start trying to listen deeply, non-judgmentally, curiously.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's where it gets even more fascinating. Jung introduced the idea of the self, not the ego, but the true center of the psyche. The self is what you become when all the fragmented parts of you are integrated. When the child, the rebel, the achiever, the critic, the dreamer, the wounded, and yes, even the lazy part, are heard, honored, and brought into harmony. The self doesn't need to force discipline. It radiates it, because it's no longer at war with itself. Think of it this way. When you're aligned, discipline isn't something you do, it's who you are. You don't have to fight to go to the gym. You want to move your body because it feels like self-respect. You don't have to grind to write the book. You need to write it because it's a sacred act of expression. You don't have to hustle to meditate. You crave the stillness because it's where you hear your own soul. That's the power of integration. That's the secret Jung never put in a productivity book. but it's the most important thing you'll ever learn about self-discipline. Now, let's pause here. Ask yourself, what part of me am I ignoring in my pursuit of success? What voice within me have I labeled as lazy or bad, instead of listening to its message? Because that voice is not your enemy, it's your initiation. And when you stop trying to suppress it and instead begin a dialogue with it, you enter what Jung called the individuation process, the journey toward wholeness. This is the real path to discipline. Not the path of control, but the path of integration. And once you walk it, you'll never struggle with discipline again, not because you've become superhuman, but because you've finally become whole. Stop forcing discipline, start integrating the war within. Let's go even deeper. Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow and you feel resistance. You don't want to do the thing. You don't want to go to the gym, or sit down to write, or make that important call. Now, the old model of discipline, the one most of us were taught, says, push through it, ignore the feeling. Just do it anyway. But what if that resistance wasn't a flaw? What if it was a form of communication? Jung believed that every psychic conflict is a conversation waiting to happen. When you feel resistance, it's a part of your psyche raising its hand saying, hey, I have something important to say. And instead of listening, we shut it down. We call it weakness. But weakness is not the same as woundedness. And most of the parts that resist discipline are not weak. They're wounded. They remember something you've forgotten. Maybe the last time you pushed yourself, it led to burnout. Maybe the last time you tried to be excellent, it triggered rejection. Maybe your inner child remembers being praised only for performance, not for being. These memories don't go away just because you want to be productive. They live in your nervous system. And when they're not acknowledged, they keep slamming on the brakes, no matter how hard you press the gas. This is why the key to sustainable discipline is inner reconciliation. You don't need to overcome resistance. You need to understand it. You need to bring all the conflicting parts of yourself to the same table. Jung would call this inner dialogue. Picture it like a council. There's the part of you that wants to achieve. There's the part of you that's afraid. There's the part of you that's tired, the part that's rebellious, the part that's ashamed. Most of us let these parts pull in opposite directions, and we wonder why we can't move. But real discipline is when the whole inner system agrees. When the achiever says, let's do this, and the fearful part says, okay, but let's do it gently, and the tired part says, only if we rest afterward, and the rebellious part says, as long as we make it fun. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And once all those parts are heard, they stop sabotaging. They begin to cooperate, and suddenly the thing you've been forcing becomes natural, effortless, aligned. Let me give you a real-world example. Think about someone like Carl Jung himself. He didn't become a legendary psychologist by grinding 20 hours a day. He became who he was because he listened deeply to the psyche, his own and others. He took time and solitude. He dove into his dreams. He wrestled with his fears. He created space for the unconscious to speak. And from that space emerged ideas that have shaped psychology forever. That's not hustle. That's alignment. That's what happens when your discipline flows from the deepest parts of your being. Not just your conscious goals, but your unconscious needs. And you can do this too. But it requires a shift in mindset. You have to stop treating discipline like a weapon and start treating it like a relationship. A relationship between all the parts of you. The warrior, the poet, the child, the critic, the dreamer, the healer. If you want to be productive in the truest sense, you must become a mediator between them all. This is where the philosophical power of Jung's work becomes so relevant. He didn't just give us tools to fix our behavior. He gave us a map for becoming whole. And wholeness is the ultimate form of discipline, because when you're whole, you're not pulled in 1,000 directions. You're not fighting yourself. You're not trying to silence your fear or shame your sadness. You're moving from a place of deep coherence. And that coherence is magnetic. It pulls you forward. It energizes you. It gives your actions meaning. You're not just ticking off tasks. You're expressing your essence. You're not just building habits, you're building integrity. And suddenly, discipline isn't something you have to do. It's something you get to do, because it becomes an act of self-respect, an act of love, an act of becoming. So let me ask you something that might change your life. Are you trying to be disciplined, or are you trying to be whole? Are you trying to force yourself into a version of success that ignores your humanity? Or are you willing to meet the parts of you that are scared, tired, or unsure and bring them with you? Because here's the secret. You don't have to kill your resistance. You have to love it into cooperation. You have to turn your inner war into an inner alliance. And when you do, you'll no longer need to struggle with discipline. You'll simply move from a place of clarity, from a place of truth, from a place of profound inner peace. That's the Jungian way. And once you learn it, once you feel it, you'll never go back. The discipline of wholeness. Why integration is the new superpower when we talk about discipline. We often imagine it as a single, sharp blade, something we wield to cut through laziness, distraction, or fear. But what if discipline is more like a tapestry? Something complex, woven from threads of your entire being, your past, your values, your wounds, your desires, your dreams. In Jungian psychology, the self is not a fragment. It is a totality. And true discipline that lasts, is not born from slicing off parts of yourself, but from weaving them together into something coherent. This is integration. And integration is not a luxury for the spiritually inclined. It is a necessity for anyone who wants to live with lasting clarity, power, and peace. Because when you are integrated, you are no longer fighting yourself. You are no longer wasting energy managing internal conflict. All of you is moving in the same direction. That's not just efficient, that's unstoppable. Integration is the real superpower, and we're starving for it in a world that glorifies fragmentation. Social media tells us to be one thing in the morning and another by night. Culture tells us to be productive, but also to rest, to be soft, but also strong, to hustle, but also be healed. We're pulled in all directions, and then we wonder why we feel exhausted. The fragmented self can never be truly disciplined, because one part is always resisting another. But when you take the time to listen to your inner voices, when you unearth your unconscious beliefs, when you bring light to the hidden corners of your psyche, you begin to discover something astonishing. The parts of you that once seemed like enemies actually want the same thing. They want safety. They want purpose. They want to be seen. They just have different strategies. And once those strategies are made visible, you can negotiate between them. You can lead them. You can become the center of your own inner universe. But that takes courage, because integration isn't comfortable. It means facing the parts of yourself you've tried to escape. It means sitting with your guilt, your shame, your unmet needs. It means realizing that maybe the reason you struggle to be disciplined is because you're still trying to earn love through achievement. Or maybe you're afraid that if you succeed, people will expect more from you, and you'll be even more alone. These fears don't go away by ignoring them. They go away by honoring them, by letting them speak, not to dominate you, but to inform you. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That is the path to self-discipline. Not forcing light, but integrating darkness. Not pretending to be whole, but becoming whole. One piece at a time. When wholeness becomes your goal, everything changes. You stop measuring your success by how many things you accomplished and start asking, was I in harmony with myself today? You stop seeing resistance as failure and begin to approach it with curiosity. What needs are going unmet? What part of me is afraid? You stop needing external validation to feel worthy and begin to trust your own process. And most importantly, you begin to move through life not as a divided being constantly trying to live up to some external standard, but as a unified force, steady, clear, and deeply powerful. That's when discipline becomes almost invisible. You just do the thing. You don't need a motivational speech or a productivity app. You've become the kind of person who naturally honors their commitments, not because they're afraid to fail, but because they like who they are when they do. So here's the final truth. You don't need more discipline. You need more self. More self with a capital S, the integrated, whole, undivided you. The you that contains all your contradictions and learns to lead them. The you that no longer fights yourself but listens, understands, and moves forward from a place of inner unity. That's what Carl Jung was pointing to all along. That's why the deepest psychological work always feels spiritual, because it's the process of becoming one with yourself. You don't need to fight harder. You need to listen deeper. You don't need to conquer the parts of you that resist. You need to love them into alignment. And once you do that, once you become whole, you'll never struggle with discipline again. Because you'll finally understand that the most powerful force in the world isn't willpower. It's wholeness.